Hey everyone, I'm Mariana, and today's video is very personal to me. It's something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while now, but also have been a little bit nervous to discuss and just generally did not know how to approach. But then I realized this is the perfect opportunity for one of my more casual sit down, let's talk videos that you guys have actually been really enjoying lately. So here I am. This is my journey as a film fan, as a cinephile. These are the films that made me fall in love with movies, that really affected me, that really stayed with me throughout the years. Films that made me interested in things I just wasn't interested in before. Films that opened me up to new topics, and films that are unlike anything I've ever seen before them. As you can tell from the title, I am splitting this into two videos, and I originally wanted to do this all in one go and just sit down for a while and talk about all of the films that changed me in some way. But then when I actually made the list of these movies, because I didn't want to forget anything, I realized how long that video would be. So I didn't want to rush through it. And also there is definitely a point at which I started looking at films differently and experiencing them differently. So that felt like a very natural place to split this, and that is where this video is going to end. So here we go. Here are half of the films that changed my life. First, a bit of background. For those of you who don't know, I did not grow up in the US. I was born and raised in Kiev, Ukraine. I guess it was still USSR when I was born and in the earlier years of my life. But my experience with film because of this is slightly different from what most of you are used to. There are a lot of Hollywood classics that I am still catching up on, and films that most of you grew up with that I just didn't. They weren't part of my childhood, and watching them now does not give me the same feeling of nostalgia as it gives many of you. While I can't remember the exact first film I ever saw, I guess it wasn't that memorable of an experience. What I remember is a lot of Russian classics and Russian contemporary films just randomly playing on TV, but also an impressive amount of Hollywood action. My childhood, among other things, involved a lot of Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and Chuck Norris, things blowing up, people punching other people in the face, a lot of that going on TV with an occasional well-known classic here and there. None of that really stuck with me though. Some of these films I was just too young to appreciate, and others were very much products of their time and didn't really make a strong impression on me. What I do remember though is my first Disney animated film. Or I guess two of them, because when I was a kid and we finally got a VHS player, oh yes guys, VHS. The first tape I watched on it was a double feature of Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast. Discovering Disney animated films as a kid is a magical moment for, I'm pretty sure, everybody. It just introduces you to this magical world that is so colorful and so joyful and so much fun that you just can't not fall in love with it. And of course, I immediately fell in love with both of these. I was always changing my mind on which one of these is my favorite back then, but Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorite films ever made to this day. This may be a surprise to some of you because if you've been watching my channel, you might have noticed that I've kind of moved away from my love for Disney, and that just happened naturally on its own, but that doesn't mean that I don't get nostalgic about those animated films of the early and mid 90s. They were my childhood 100%, and when I heard about Disneyland and Disney World, those were the places that I really wanted to go. I had an obsession, just like any other kid. These two animated films are not only my earliest and most vivid memory of actually watching a full-length feature film, well, animated feature film, but also introduced me me to the amazing music and songs of Alan Menken. I swear, part of my love for musicals stems from those first Disney films that I watched, because his songs always made the films that they are in a little bit more special for me than the Disney films where they're not featured. So that was definitely a big part of my childhood as well. I had cassettes, yes, cassettes, that I listened to that were the soundtracks to these movies and a few more animated films, and I just knew all the words, sang them all day long. This was a full-on childhood obsession. Now, from Disney to horror, and yes, I got introduced to the horror genre when I was way too young for it. I was about 7 or 8 years old when I accidentally stumbled upon The Omen on TV. Yes, the original Omen. Oh my God. The Omen is not the film that made me a horror fan, let me just assure you, because I am forever traumatized by The Omen. The music alone, just thinking about it and remembering it, because yes, I do remember it, makes my heart rate go up. These films, which for some reason I did watch the entire franchise, but the first film in particular, just thinking about it fills me with dread, and I just feel like bad things are going to happen. I am definitely traumatized by The Omen. I did rewatch that first film when I was a teenager, and it was just as horrifying to me, and I haven't had the courage to watch it since. Easily the most horrifying film experience of my childhood. I actually addressed this at one point in a very old video where I talked about horror films that actually scared me, and after that, one of you lovely subscribers actually sent me this, the entire Omen collection. Thanks for that. Good one. I have not watched it. I may watch it one day.
But it is not this day.
If the person who sent this to me is still watching my channel, would you please comment below? I'd like to say hi. Now, the first horror I appreciated and what actually made me fall in love with the genre were Alien and Aliens. Those two were always on TV back to back. I don't know what was with horror movies on TV when I was growing up. That's how I experienced them for the first time, and that's why I always think of them as kind of one thing, two parts of one thing. Also, obviously, films that I saw when I was way too young for them, but I think I was about 11 or 12 when I first saw them, so it wasn't that bad. I wasn't horrified and just chilled to my bone. This was definitely scary, but this was the fun kind of scary. This was when scary became exciting to me. I was absolutely blown away by these two when I saw them for the first time, and every time I watch them, and I've seen them so many times, obviously I own them, so I do watch them still, I am amazed by these films. They're absolutely classics and masterpieces in my mind. Back then, though, they were definitely unlike anything I've ever seen before. This was eye-opening for me, from the story, to the creature, to the scares, to the action, to the whole space setup, and the horror and loneliness of space. And yes, these were the films that also introduced me to sci-fi a little bit, but that passion didn't develop until later. These were definitely a huge step towards becoming a film fan for me. And of course, I was obsessed with Ellen Ripley. I wanted to be Ellen Ripley when I grew up because she was just the coolest lady I have ever seen in film or on television. I loved her so much, and she's still one of my favorite characters in film in general. Now, I don't think I have ever addressed this on my channel. Maybe I mentioned it briefly, but I am fascinated by the Middle Ages and early Renaissance. The Middle Ages have been my thing since I was about 13, and it all started with Braveheart. You know, continuing with the theme of me watching movies I was way too young for. Initially, I watched this because I just really wanted to know why Mel Gibson had this random blue paint on his face on the VHS that we had. I was curious what that makeup was about. And little did I know that this became my first real film obsession. Not in a way when you want to rewatch your favorite movie when you were a kid 100 times, you want to watch it every day, but actually this film sucked me in so much and I could not stop thinking about it. Braveheart. of all things. This was my favorite film for a very long time, and I was annoying all of my friends with it, all of my family and extended family. I was making people watch this movie. I'm sure the parents of my friends were really happy about that one. I loved the story. I was fascinated by where it was set, when it was set, what was going on. I was really interested in the character. I loved the tragedy of it all for some reason. I really responded to this film in a way where nobody would have expected. Obviously, later on, I found out about all of the historical inaccuracies and all of that. But back then, once again, this was something that was unlike anything I've seen before, and it just blew my mind. And to be honest, I don't think I was aware that this was based on any historical person or anything like that. So I just watched this as this dark, fascinating story with a very intense ending. But yeah, 13-year-old Marianna's favorite movie, and really is what jump-started my love for the Middle Ages. Also, it was around that age that I really got gut-punched by a film for the first time, and I am sorry if this is a spoiler, because I guess technically saying that this movie is a gut punch is kind of spoiling the ending, but also this movie came out in the 90s. So if you don't want to know what it is, then just skip to this time in the video. But for everybody else, the film that I'm talking about is Life is Beautiful. I did not see it right away when it came out. It's something that I heard about because of the Oscars, because around that time was when I started watching the Oscars and really paying attention to what films are being talked about. But I saw it a little bit later, and it absolutely devastated me. This is also when I really started paying attention to war films, because war films were just something that were a part of my life growing up. A bit of context here. If you grew up in the former Soviet Union, then war films are something that you just grow up with, because this is a topic that is very important to the history of these countries and something that you were introduced to at a very early age. We had veterans come over to schools. We had war films galore on TV. It's not something you can miss if you grow up in Eastern Europe. So it's not like I was unaware of the topic of World War II and concentration camps. And I definitely knew it's something that happens, and it was a topic that was difficult and important to discuss. But Life is Beautiful is a film that is so much about hope and humanity and kind of having the determination to get through things and even the most awful things and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I've never really seen a film do that before, and I've never really thought about the life that happens during wartime. This film almost tricks you into thinking that everything is going to be okay, that somehow they're going to get through this, and the father is going to be able to keep up this game that he made up to protect his son from the horrors of concentration camps and the horrors of World War II. And so then when, you know, the thing happens, it's such a gut punch, and I was devastated by this film. I was impressed, and I laughed in the beginning, and then I cried at the end. It was just a whirlwind of emotion, and it was absolutely an unforgettable film for me that made me interested in war films and made me go back and watch a lot of the classics and actually pay attention to new films that were coming out on the topic of war and on the topic of concentration camps in particular. So yeah, it was a very important film for me. Now, finally, we have arrived at the first film I saw at a movie theater. Yes, you heard that right. The first time I actually went to a movie theater was when I was in my teens. I don't know why I never went before. I don't think it was something that my family did. It's not like the concept of going to the movies was foreign to me. I definitely knew movie theaters existed, but just it wasn't a part of my childhood, and I don't think many of my friends went to see movies at a theater either. So the first film that I saw on the big screen was The Sixth Sense.
I see dead people.
Can you imagine that being your first movie theater experience? Because that was very intense to me. Obviously, the twist at the end, which I didn't know that you could do that in movies to begin with. But also, I'm pretty sure that movie gave me nightmares because it is so tense and gloomy and creepy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved it, and by that point, I was interested in horror films, so it's not like I wanted to never see it again. I've definitely seen it a bunch of times afterwards, but seeing that on the big screen as your introduction to this huge cinema screen concept was very intense. Plus, you know, it introduced me to my queen, Toni Collette, whom I love to this day, as you well know. Just have never looked back since then, and after that, I started seeing as many films as I possibly could in the theater. I've seen films that weren't really that good just because I could, and I've seen films multiple times just because there was nothing else to watch. It definitely became an obsession after that, and I have no regrets. Finally, the last film that I'm going to talk about today is the film that made me go, wow, they can make movies like that? I think those of you who have been around my channel for a while can kind of guess what this film is, but if you haven't been around my channel for a while, the film I'm talking about is The Fellowship of the Ring. Really, the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy completely blew my mind because I didn't know they could make movies like this. I really didn't. And this was when I fully fell in love with film and just realized that that is something that had to be a part of my life somehow, because how could it not be? It's amazing. It's a whole world that is created. It's something that feels so real. It is just books that are coming to life on screen. It's characters and creatures that you would never see in real life, and yet here they are on screen and you totally believe they exist. To say that I was blown away by this film is honestly an understatement. What The Lord of the Rings did for me was really what Harry Potter did to slightly younger people that were, I guess, still my generation, but just a little bit younger, because when I was watching Lord of the Rings, younger kids, a few years younger, were watching and reading Harry Potter, and I kind of brushed that off and thought, oh, you know, Harry Potter's for kids. I have Lord of the Rings. And honestly, everybody in my class in school was reading this, watching this movie, repeatedly discussing it, spoiling the second film for me because they read the book. You know, someone decided to come up to me and excitedly spoil the whole thing with Gandalf for me, which... Thanks for that. That wasn't nice. Don't spoil people on things. But yeah, this is the film that really marks when I truly started experiencing film in a different way, when I decided to explore further and look past what's on screen, when I wanted to know how this was made, where this was filmed, who are these people on screen. I really started caring about film because of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I am incredibly grateful that these films exist, and this magic is, you know, my precious, mine to own and watch whenever I want and revisit this world, and just, it makes me feel happy. These are films that truly make me feel happy. I'm obviously obsessed with The Lord of the Rings, and I have never been more obsessed with any other trilogy, with any other single film. This is forever my favorite film of all time. We're clearly ending this on a very dramatic note, and watch, now that I have said that about The Lord of the Rings, now I will see something that's going to be my new favorite, and I'm going to be making a video saying, guys, I have a new all-time favorite. It's hard to pick all-time favorites, and definitely I'm not always in the mood for fantasy, but you know, I'm never gonna say no to Lord of the Rings, and it always is going to bring me back to a very special feeling and a very special time in my life. So that's it for the first half of movies that changed my life. I hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed making it and just gushing about all of these movies that really had a huge impact on me. I am incredibly excited to talk about the other movies, the ones that are going to be in the second video. I think you guys are going to be interested in what I have to say about them and what movies those are. These films really are films that surprised me, and they were the first surprises of my movie watching experience. The films that I'm going to talk about in my next video are films that kind of changed the way I see the world in a way, and that is a whole different, interesting discussion on its own. So look forward to that. Let me know in the comments below what movies changed your life or affected you greatly when you were a kid and a teenager. What movies made you interested in film? I would love to know. As always, a huge thank you to every single one of you for watching this video and being here and staying subscribed to my channel. I appreciate every single one of you. A very special thank you to all of my patrons, and an extra special thank you to the patrons whose names are on the screen right now. Thank you to all of you guys. I hope everyone enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos, and I hope you are having a wonderful day. I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!